There's some very important skills on the way to energetic communication, and that's the journey I want to take you on, because those steps are important in and of themselves, massively important, but they also set you up, help to set you up for sensing the really subtle stuff, and then bit by bit getting to a place where you can, and maybe even hear really accurate things coming from your horse. So in my experience, there's two main things that get in the way of people hearing and communicating with their horses accurately on an energetic level. The first one is that they believe they can't do it, which I think is the case for most people. And I was certainly, excuse me, in that boat. The second is not being still enough on the inside. So if you can imagine a still pond, you could throw the tiniest of pebbles into it and you would see every ripple that comes out from that tiny little pebble. Or you could have a raging ocean and throw the Empire State Building into it and you wouldn't even notice. So an awful lot of horse communication comes in tiny little pebbles. So if you're not still on the inside, if you're sort of worrying about things, if you're stressed about things, that creates an awful lot of noise inside, a lot of tension inside. And that gets in the way of our ability to sense these subtle vibrations. I'd like to explain my journey in the hope that it helps you with yours. And at the beginning, I think you might find, well, this has got nothing to do with energetic communication. I'm not hearing my horse's thoughts here. This doesn't sound like what she's promised. But what I'm trying to do is to bypass those two main things. So that belief that you won't be able to do it, that it's for other people, not you, these magical people who can hear horses' thoughts, that's not you. And also the sort of tumultuousness that can be on the inside. For most people, if I was to say, ask your horse if he's happy or not, that could kick off a huge amount of inner turmoil, because what if he's not? What if he doesn't like me? What if he says something and he doesn't want to be with me anymore? A lot of people can go down that rabbit hole, and you've just created a raging ocean inside. So what I'm going to do, there's some very important skills on the way to energetic communication, and that's the journey I want to take you on, because those steps are important in and of themselves, massively important, but they also set you up, help to set you up for sensing the really subtle stuff, noticing the really subtle stuff, and then bit by bit getting to a place where you can figure out what that means and maybe even hear really accurate things coming from your horse. So the first thing I'd like to suggest, and again it'll sound backwards, but I'm going to suggest that you talk to your horse more. So I imagine if you're on this channel, you already do talk to your horse a lot. But what I'd like to suggest is that you do it on another level, because I think particularly for a lot of people, there might be an environment where, oh, coochie coo, hi buddy, how are you? All this sort of lovey talk is accepted, but actually talking to them as if they're almost like a human being, which I know will throw up a lot of conversation. I do see horses as people, but I also acknowledge there are differences. But for now, if we can set that conversation aside, that's another podcast all on its own. I'm talking about speaking to your horse as you would your best friend, human friend. That's often in a lot of places sort of frowned upon. People would look at you and think, what are you doing? Yet actually it's a really important thing to do. So for example, if there's anything, this is a really good place to start. If there's anything that creates a little bit of anxiety in your horse, perhaps his best friend is being taken away for the day, he's going off to a show, coming back later, and your horse always struggles a little bit with that, or even a lot with that. If you can find a quiet space before their friend leaves, if it's too late, you can still try it afterwards. But ideally, before they go, and you can remind them afterwards or as it's occurring, as they're getting into the box and going away, explain to them. And it's a bit like if you were sat with your friend and your friend's on the phone or they're watching the TV or there's somebody over there, their attention's not on you, they're not going to hear a word you say. And it's the same with horses. So you need to sort of be in a quiet space where you can have a conversation without them being all distracted. And even then, they're not used to being most likely communicated with in this way. You may need to repeat yourself a few times. But if you can explain the situation, explain your friend's just going off for a fun day, they'll be back. And you perhaps at tea time, they'll be back at tea time, and you could project an image. If you just imagine in your mind that friend coming home at tea time, their head popping out of the stable door or across from the field and seeing their friend come home. If you could picture the friend coming home around tea time and give them a really strong image and just hold that strongly in your mind with the intention of projecting it to them. And I'm fully aware how bonkers this sounds, but just try it and see what happens. And reassure them they'll be back later. They'll be back later. They'll be back at tea time. Can you see in my mind? I'm showing you that they'll be back later. And then if you can bring your energy down, so if the horse is about to go and you can feel their energy coming up, you can anchor your energy down and breathe and soothe them through soothing your own energy and remind them they'll be back at tea time. Remember? I'll be back at tea time. And you might be astounded at the difference that it makes. That's just one example. But anything that's happening, there's so much in the human world that we understand, so we're not bothered about, and don't remember that the horse sees the world completely differently, particularly as a prey animal. There's an awful lot they have to be afraid of, and they've evolved to be afraid of. So anything they don't understand, it can make an enormous difference if you pause and take the time to show them. Perhaps it's an object that suddenly appeared and you're like, oh, it's fine, it's just a such and such. That doesn't mean anything to them. But if you can take a few minutes and explain, look, this is a whatever it is, and maybe go over and touch it with your nose and show them and sort of soothe that worry in their mind, what can happen is that they suddenly start to realise, it's a bit like if you were in a foreign country and nobody spoke your language and nobody cared to try and communicate with you. You might get a plate of food thrown at you, you might be pushed here and there, you didn't know why. The confusion and isolation and the fear that would probably develop in you is similar, very similar to what I've seen in so many horses. Yet if somebody sat down with you and just calmly tried to show you something, they can't talk your language, but they're sitting with you and trying to show you what the situation is, or to explain what's needed from you, or whatever it is, can you imagine the relief? Can you imagine the sort of gratefulness in your heart that you'd find in somebody who felt safe coming to help you in a world you just didn't understand and felt completely isolated in? That can often be the case. So explaining everything It sounds odd as I say that in order to hear the horse better, I'm suggesting that you do more of the talking. But this does so many things because, as I say, it helps, first of all, for you to demonstrate to the horse that you're paying attention, that you're there for them, that you're going to recognise anything that causes them stress. And there's an awful lot of people who sort of present themselves as being very knowledgeable horse people. And there's a toughness to them, there's a harshness to them. Oh, come on, give it a smack, give him a kick, get on with it. He's just this, he's just that. Blindly oblivious to all kinds of things going on with the horse. And often it's the less advanced person, it's the person with less confidence in their horsemanship that's actually noticing all of these things. And if you can give yourself permission to explore this, and I know it's not easy if you are surrounded by strong, opinionated equestrians who think they know best. But if you can find some quiet time to do this with your horse, as I say, they'll suddenly start looking at you in a different light. But also, they'll start to tell you more. Because why would you bother? If you were in a country, nobody's trying to hear you, nobody understands your language, you'd just stay silent soon enough, wouldn't you? You may try a lot in the beginning, but as people just keep turning away or just pushing you around, not paying any attention. I'm not suggesting that's what you're doing, but often in the world of horses, just through the most common management patterns that have evolved over the generations, there's an awful lot of overriding the horse and just, this is how it is, get on with it, get used to it. If you suddenly had that person sitting with you and trying to understand what you were trying to say, can you imagine? Well, if you want to hear what I've got to say, grab a pen. It can be the same with the horses. So we're opening a doorway. We're saying, I'm here to listen. I'm going to try and listen. I can't promise I'll hear you, but I'll do my very best. I'll do my very best. And that shifts an awful lot. Then within that, if you can, follow the breadcrumbs. So for example, last night I was leaving our little herd of 3. And my boy Gabriel, there was something incredibly subtle. Sometimes he stays at the gate because he's asking, can I go back over there where there's a little more grass? And I have to say, no more today. Got to watch our waistline back in the paddock where there's less. Sometimes he wants some more scratches. Sometimes he wants this, that and the other. But he just stood quietly at the gate. And I said, what is it, buddy? Because I said, do you want to come into the arena where it's shady, there's flies, you could all have a nap. I asked him about all the things that he normally asks for at that time of night. And he just stood there. On the outside, there was nothing that gave me a clue. However, I noticed that when I was bringing him from his little paddock with more grass back to his one with less, he wanted to go. He's normally perfectly happy from going from one to the other. He doesn't look elsewhere, but he looked towards the yard. So I remembered that and thought, So I popped his head collar on and I took him out of the field and I said, show me, what is it? And very soon he walked towards the yard and very soon I saw my 2 sons with their group of friends walking across the field, chatting away. Lovely, lovely group of lads. However, Gabriel didn't know who they were. I hadn't heard them, but he had, and he'd also recognised that they were voices he didn't know, and probably there was, a number of them that he was unnerved by. So I said, come on, let's go meet them. So I grabbed a couple of carrots and we met up with the boys and they obviously gave him a couple of carrots. And once he knew that's who they were, that's what was going on, he was perfectly happy going back to his field and settling for the night. So it was literally, he was stood at the gate looking at me saying, there's something. He wasn't even looking at me and then looking over at the gate, nothing obvious like that. He did just that brief that I remembered as he walked in. He sort of was looking, he wasn't even looking for something. He just looked like he was going to wander off to the yard. And I said, where are you going? Come on in here. And didn't think any more of it until he stood still and looked at me. But he's used to me trying to hear him, you see. So he's the herd leader. He was aware of something that was unusual. He was concerned and he said, I need to understand what that is. And by following that little breadcrumb, Poppy's head collar, take me, show me, where do you want to go? He was totally reassured and happy for the night. So it seemed like a really, really simple thing. He stood at the gate just looking at me, not going off to graze, not doing his usual evening things, but extremely subtle. So if you can pay attention, everything means something. And it will feel at times like you're following breadcrumbs to nowhere. You might think, well, I've still no idea what that was about. It doesn't matter. Keep following the breadcrumbs, because the more you show the horse that you're listening, that you're trying to understand, the more they'll try and show you. So I'd really encourage you, have a go, and please comment below how you get on. I'd love to hear how you all find this exercise. Is it helpful? Is it frustrating? Did you find any clarity? Any questions that come up, and then we'll go on to the next step. Take care. Bye bye.